Hi, I'm Dave Irvine, Executive Director at the Highlands Center for Natural History, and by now you all know that we're celebrating our 25th anniversary. And as part of that project, we are continuing this video series, and today we are in the habitat at Coyote Springs Elementary School, which was our first habitat program that we started way back 17 years ago. And I am joined by three wonderful people, Lisa Packard, who is our first habitat coordinator at the Highlands Center, and then Ann Mira and Sue Smith, longtime volunteers here at the Habitat program. So we're going to talk about the Schoolyard Habitat and how the Highlands Center worked with different schools for a period of 3 years to establish a place like this and then create outdoor learning opportunities for their students to get outside and enjoy the wonders of nature. So thank you all for being with us today. And Lisa, I'm going to start with you. So you're back, you've returned from the East Coast to do this interview with us and seeing this beautiful habitat. How does that make you feel coming back here today?
So joyful, humbled by all the work that has been done by the habitat coordinators following me and by all the learning that's happened, cooperation with the schools and teachers. I feel really humbled and really excited to be back in this ecosystem.
So this habitat was Nicole Trichel's original vision, our founding director, and then she handed it off to you to sort of make it happen. So tell us about those early days of trying to establish this program and creating it from scratch.
Yes, thank you. So the position was posted as a part-time, and I had a 9-month-old and a 4-year-old. And when I read the job description, I thought, wow, the Highlands Center for Natural History, where is that? And this job description was written for me. I was so excited. And when I came for an interview, it was at this school, and this garden space was entirely decomposed granite. There was nothing else. And so I did my teaching demonstration having brought in some egg cartons, and I had placed I had walked around and picked up pieces of sticks. There were like little bits of sticks that I don't know where they were from, and maybe a larger stone and a smaller stone, and then the students had to go out and explore. That was what I had to work with. There was not a plant here. When Nicole offered the position, she asked me, are you open to doing other work at the Highlands Center? Because I'm not sure if this program's going to work. It's an experiment, it's an idea, it's a concept. We really want to extend our work from the Highlands Center that was just being established in the forest. There wasn't even the building yet. Can I develop something that's at the school sites? And that, having been a public school teacher, was an incredible combination. But I said, yes, of course, I would love to work at the Highlands Center. And I'm thinking in my mind, I'm going to make sure this works.
And Ann and Sue, I'll come to you two next. You were longtime volunteers of this program, especially here at Coyote Springs. So tell us how you got involved and the roles that you played over that time. And Ann, do you want to start? And then we'll go to Sue.
Well, I retired from elementary school teaching and came from Indiana out here. And I really wanted to learn about my new environment. And so I saw the article in the newspaper about Highlands Center needing docents. And that really rang my bell. So there I came to Highlands Center, learned a lot about what was going on there, how to work with kids and teach them about their ecosystems that exist here. And then through all of those experiences, I met Lisa and was very intrigued by the way she had made science standards part of a curriculum that could be taught in a garden at a school. And being a gardener myself, as well as an elementary school science teacher, and kind of an environmental teacher on the side, I said, this is what I'm really interested in. And so Lisa and I connected. I started learning all of the lessons that she had written from scratch, K through 5. And we became a team, and I started volunteering in the Schoolyard Habitat Garden and learning a lot about how to teach this ecosystem to kids outdoors.
Yeah, great. Sue?
Well, I came to the program as a master gardener. I decided to take that program in 2007, and it turned out that was the first year that they had mentors. And my mentor was a volunteer here at the Coyote Springs Habitat, Nancy. And she brought me out. I had an opportunity to work with first graders or kindergartners. I decided I wanted to work with the first graders. And I'm a very outdoorsy person. So the opportunity to teach science in a habitat like this to young children, and maybe perhaps you never know what they might take away from it and how it might influence them in life. And Lisa and I were just talking about those first students I worked with are in their early 20s now. Wouldn't it be wonderful to know what they're doing and did something stick from the habitat?
Well, let's develop that a little bit more. Tell us, why do you think it's so important for children to have this type of experience, especially like right outside their classroom door, right here at a school site? Mary Ann, you want to start, and then we go to Lisa?
Oh, absolutely. Well, we, as elementary school teachers, later in my career, really focused on being more authentic about our education, being more hands-on, thematic, and we kind of put some of the textbooks on the shelf for a while and tried to do more authentic types of activities. And that is exactly what these students get at this school out in the habitat. They get to learn science and math, sometimes even English and reading, outdoors in a real environment. And it's so important for kids to realize that school is not just inside the walls of a building, but you learn everywhere. And that while you're out here, this is not really just recess, it's a learning experience. And so it was fun to be part of a group of volunteers to show that to not only the students, but that the teachers could watch how it could happen and take them sometimes out of their comfort zone by teaching science outdoors in nature.
Yeah, absolutely. Lisa?
Yes, in designing the curriculum, I was committed to it being 100% outdoors. I'd meet the students at the gate, and I never went inside. I was outside all day, and it was class after class after class. And we came out in wind, we came out in blistery hot, we came out in cold, we came out when there was snow on occasion, we came out when there was rain and would stand underneath the eaves. And I think that this curriculum was teaching students to be outside and all the elements of outside and comparing, contrasting, experiencing outside. I also think of a sense of wonder. As Mary Ann had mentioned, that these students equated being outside with recess. And so at the very beginning, what I really had to establish that first year was, how do you walk into the habitat? That this is a learning space and we're going to slow down, because everywhere you walk there might be a horned lizard, there might be a scat from a bird, and there might be an ant, and really get focusing on ants and all of the animals. This garden was extraordinary in that Steve Morgan designed it to mimic the different plant zones. And so here we are in Prescott Valley with the riparian area, and then the chaparral, the grassland, which they know so well because they're in the grassland, but they were able to visit, you can see the pines here, they were able to go up to the highest point of the habitat garden and be in the pines. And so I think that right here at their own school, they were getting a taste of what they would do in second grade and fourth grade when they went to the Highlands Center for field trips. So it also bridged the gap between their schoolyard and what else the Highlands Center was doing. And then the second school that I worked at was Territorial Elementary out in Chino Valley. Again, the grassland. That garden was not as well established. And I like to call that one the ants and asphalt curriculum. And again, it was about getting the students, they would get so excited watching an anthill and observing that Rachel Carson sense of wonder, slowing down and having the teacher, the classroom teacher and myself guide the students to observe.
Wonderful, wonderful. Sue?
Well, you know, I believe in the principle in education that you remember 90% of what you do and only 10% of what you're told. So a habitat program like this was set up so beautifully where everything was about making observations, drawing at the end of the lesson something about what you learned that day. So it was all about doing and observing, and I think it's a beautiful way for students to learn. I think the other thing that I loved about it was the consistency of it happening every 3 weeks for them. It wasn't something that happened once a year.
Definitely more contact hours per student in our habitat programs and even the programs that we do on site at the Highlands Center. So we have something we call mission moments that we've been talking to everybody about throughout these interviews. And does any particular mission moment, one kind of experience that you can remember with a student or class out here in the habitat stand out to you as something that still brings joy to you? And Lisa, you want to start this time?
Sure, thank you. I'm going to share a story of a 2nd grade teacher and of a 5th grade lesson. And I'd also like to give the context of the curriculum. We've mentioned how the curriculum was engaging and it was outdoors. It was also science standards based, as Mary Ann had mentioned. So the kindergarteners were focused on what is a garden and what is a native plant garden, as opposed to when we're planting a vegetable garden. 1st grade was the 1st grade orchard caretakers. And we are under a tree that has fruit, and every year we'd have Jeff Shalau from the Cooperative Extension. I hear that he's just retired recently, but Jeff would come out and do a demonstration for the students. The trees all got beautifully pruned, and meanwhile the students in their journals were understanding. They understood where a tree should be pruned because of the lesson, and then having to draw where a tree should be pruned. And then it was taken care of. That was part of the caretaking, orchard caretakers. The 2nd graders were our wetland watchers, looking at that riparian zone and some of the plants that grow in those lower, wetter areas. We needed someone to be taking care of drip lines, so they became aware of, oh, there's little bits of water feeding this new garden, this growing garden. 3rd grade were the soil stewards. That's where we got into worms. So I want to speak of, I think it was a 2nd grade or 3rd grade teacher who she was working on her master's degree, and every lesson had a portion of it in independent study, as we say in the flow of traditional education, where students would draw in their journals. They had explored, we'd come back and have a direct instruction, and then they would go independent study, draw in their nature journals, and they had their own special spots. And this teacher, through her master's degree work, decided to do some research on how more effective would her English language arts be if she brought students out even beyond the habitat lessons to do observations in their nature journals and then write, as opposed to she did a test and control, as opposed to students just being in the classroom and writing. And the quality of the writing was so superior when she brought students out into the habitat, combined with the habitat lessons that were happening every 3 weeks. And she wrote her master's work on that, which was really an honor. The 3rd graders were the soil stewards. I can't tell you how many times it was really joyful to hear a student scream across the habitat, I found a worm, look how big this worm is! And do some tests. They did some soil tests, and actually we're learning the science, the chemistry behind the NPK tests of soil, different types of soil. And there's always a need in these habitats of spreading mulch to keep the moisture down. And so the 3rd graders were out here. Janice Jackson was a fabulous teacher who had been here at Coyote Springs, and she'd be helping. There's the bucket brigade of all of the wood chips. And then 4th grade was the taxonomy team, and that was when we got into, this was all based on the science standards. So it wasn't just a random decision of 2nd grade being wetland watchers. It was tied actually to the water cycle that was part of the state science standards. And then the 3rd grade, they had to learn about soil and what creates soil, and rocks. We're learning different types of metamorphic igneous. And then the 4th graders, that was when they were getting into classification and had to learn the different parts of the different families and kingdoms. And they started to be able to name these plants by their genus species. And with support from the master gardeners and garden clubs, we had signs put in that I see are still here, and they're so beautiful, professionally done. So students were really learning the common name and then the genus species of these. And then the 5th grade was the solar seekers. That was a tricky one because the curriculum for 5th grade was human anatomy and astronomy. And I'm thinking, all right, outdoors, human anatomy and astronomy. So it was a wonderful exercise in being extraordinarily creative. One of the lessons that I really enjoyed was a solar walk. I started off the lesson by asking students, have you ever gone on a long trip? And I always want to engage, there's a hook at the beginning. Oh, I've been to Flagstaff. I've been to California. Some who had more opportunities had been to the east coast of Florida to Disney. And then I'd say, imagine that lesson as an ant. That is astronomical. That's an astronomical unit. And then we would walk the solar system measuring the astronomical units, and it was all doing math. There was lots of great math ratios and pacing it out. And what was really great was a place like Territorial Elementary School out in Chino Valley. We rocked it out there because it just went and went and went. We didn't have the confines of a beautiful garden in the gate. Instead, we just could keep going in their asphalt and ants and walk it. And then when I did the program at Miller Valley, we used their grassland, their ball field. And then when I was at Washington Traditional, we actually had to leave the school grounds. I got permission from the principal. It was like a field trip, and we walked. And then for the anatomy, the human anatomy, many of these plants, these native plants, have medicinal properties. And so the lesson was on what are the different parts of the body, the different systems, because that's what they had to learn, the cardiovascular system and the skeletal system, and what are the different plants that treat those parts of the body. Well, we have a wonderful volunteer, of the many volunteers. Her name is Faith Roloffs, and I believe that she's spoken also in some of these interviews.
Interview.
And yes. Faith Roloffs had been studying and impersonating and acting Mary Ramos, who was a pioneer woman. And she would carry her basket with all of the medicinal herbs to treat the pioneers. And so together we collaborated on a lesson where I'd have the students out, we were starting the lesson, and all of a sudden this woman would wander in full dress from the, tell me what era?
Just pioneer times.
Pioneer times. And she had her basket full, and the students were, like, I'd pretend I was still teaching and didn't know she had arrived, and they'd be like, they'd be whispering and whispering, who's that, what's that, who's that woman, what's happened? And she played it so well. It was the very first year here at Coyote Springs. And then she would engage, she had the accent and say, oh, you're learning about the body, well, I can tell you what plants treat it. And that was the exploration and the learning. Then when I was at downtown at Washington Traditional, we actually walked over to a native scape that was within walking distance, and she again taught that lesson, and it was even more surreal for them because she really came out of nowhere.
Wow, that's great. You took us through all the grades, but
all the grades,
let's
K5.
go, Sue, if you can think of a moment for you.
Well, there's several that I could talk about, but one thing that was so exciting was most of the days I volunteered. I was here before school started, so students were coming off the buses. And there was one time when there were 3 or 4 of them walking together, they spotted me and they go, "It's Habitat Day." And they were just so excited that they knew they were going to be out in the habitat that day. Another one that comes to mind though, and I don't remember exactly what the lesson was about, but it required laying down and looking up at the sky and making observations. And they had the hardest time laying down. And finally I laid down and I said, come on and just lay down next to me. Let's do this. Let's go look at the sky. And I finally got them all to look up and do something they weren't necessarily comfortable with because they weren't supposed to lay on the ground, but here they were being asked to do it. So those are a couple of them that come to mind for me. There's many others.
This is wonderful. Connecting back to the earth that you were able to provide. Marianne.
Well, I'm going to segue off of what Lisa said about Faith and Mary Ramos. When I was in the Habitat in a 4th grade class, the same situation, Faith just wanders in and she's got her basket and she really looks the part of a pioneer. And she never left character. She was from the olden days. And I'm telling you, every single child in that 4th grade, how did she get here? How can we have a pioneer in our habitat? They totally bought everything she said, and she immediately had them connected to the plants that you could find right here in this schoolyard habitat. And I was so impressed by how a person who was actually in character and had taken the time to research the plants that were here and how they connected to the olden days. You know, kids don't understand where medicine comes from. So to actually see those plants, I saw Faith showing you those plants in another interview.
Yes.
And she does know her stuff.
She does.
That was one of my most fun memories. I was just kind of floored that these world savvy 4th graders bought that hook, line, and sinker that she really was a pioneer. The other thing I wanted to mention is that talking about kind of Sue's experience with students being so excited about being in the habitat that day, what started to happen is that kids went home and were telling their parents, wow, we love being in the habitat. It's so much fun, and we get to do this with plants and this with animals and this with bugs. And the parents who really are not really understanding a lot about it are asking questions. What is this habitat? And well, what exactly do you do there? And so we started realizing that we needed to make this experience extend beyond the school classroom. And so this habitat became an event center. Mm-hmm. They started having their fall festivals in the habitat. The parents came and started having little work parties to help clean up. You know, all sorts of events happened in the habitat. So it was not only a classroom habitat, it was a multi-generational event site that basically taught parents about what this garden is and what their native environment might be. And so I was really excited to see how the kids' excitement transferred to pulling their parents into it as well.
Yeah, wonderful. When you think about future for this program or for the Highlands Center in general, any kind of thoughts come to mind? And Sue, let's start with you this time.
Well, I think always it's been a challenge sustaining the programs, making sure that there's staff on hand at each school that will be supportive of getting the teachers out with their classrooms. I think this school has been very, very fortunate that way. But that has been something that I have observed a lot, is just the need for a key 1 or 2 people that can keep driving the program.
Yeah. Mary Ann?
I think that the Habitat program is certainly an important outreach of Highlands Center, but I think that the Highlands Center does this for our entire community and honestly our entire state. You know, it's a destination spot for teaching about our outdoor life, and I think that as we continue to evolve as a center, the fact that we are always expanding our offerings. The Discovery Garden is such a wonderful addition to Highlands Center, and potentially down the road some more expansion into the Dells or other nature centers. It's so necessary here because, believe it or not, when you're surrounded by all this wonderful environment, kids don't always get out into that environment.
That's true.
And honestly, their parents don't get out in it a lot either. And so I think that, for the future of Highlands Center and all education programs that we provide, right, it's important to keep that going because, as we all discovered during COVID years of shutdown, being out in nature was a lifesaver.
Yeah.
Really important to be grounded in something that was still normal.
Yes, absolutely. Lisa, I'll give you the last word. What do you think, what would you like to see the program as a person who got it off the ground, literally, and got all these wonderful plants to grow here? What are your thoughts?
Thank you. When I was given the charge to grow it from nothing, from a bare landscape, and also from every time I asked Nicole or Fiona Reed, how would you like this to be shaped? I was given full autonomy. They said, you design it, you have creative license. And the one thing I kept thinking of is, if I'm only here for 2 years, how do I make it sustainable? Because the plants will continue, so the program must continue, and the children continue. And so some thoughts early on were to, the themes for each grade level was one way I was hoping, like it's a rite of passage and kids would get excited. Oh, when I'm a second grader, I'll be a wetland watcher. So I was hoping the curriculum itself would be strong, but also the way in which the teachers were trained. And so the first year it was modeling everything, and then the second year of the program, weaning the teachers into co-teaching. And then by the end of the second year, they were actually teaching the whole lesson with me standing on the side to mentor and observe and give feedback. I also gave professional development workshops to the teachers on outdoor classroom management. What do you do with the gear and the tools that are out here? But when I left, and I ran the program for 6 years and ended up having an opportunity with 6 different schools, it became really clear the further I got away from that second year and passed it along, there was teacher turnover. And so even if I had done a strong job of introducing and training the program, that teacher leaves. And so I think the sustainability of this program is having an outdoor educator who's comfortable outside and who knows the tips and tricks of teaching outside. Outdoor instruction is really different than inside. And also, I learned from some of the teachers, I remember my first year here at Coyote Springs, there was a veteran teacher. He was phenomenal, teaching 5th grade. And he was incredible in the classroom. And he said he had never done cooperative learning groups, like small breakout groups. And the Habitat program is designed, by design, it's having kids work in small groups. And he was learning a new strategy for teaching. And so I think and he really enjoyed it and felt enriched as an educator. So I think having the expertise of the Highlands Center, who best knows outdoor instruction, coming back, whether it's workshops or being able to grow the number of habitat coordinators, I think that would be great.
And we are working on that. That's a good segue into the future, because we are working on trying to keep the habitats going. As you know, we now have habitats in every elementary school in the Humboldt district, and just about all of them in the Prescott district. And come next year, with Taylor Hicks coming into the program, we will have one at just about every elementary school in Prescott. So that is kind of something that we're working on and trying to figure out how to sustain these habitats better. Well, thank you very much. Thank you both for being with me today, but more importantly, for all the time and energy and effort that you put into getting this program going. And we are going to kind of continue to sustain it. All of you might know that this program is sustained through your tax credit donations, that we partner with a different school every year. And as I mentioned before, next year, Taylor Hicks will be our partner school coming into the program. And if you want to learn more about the Highlands Center and what's going on at the Highlands Center today, just go to highlandscenter.org and see about all of our wonderful programs coming up in the near future. And thanks again for joining us today.